your podcast. For those listening, Epiphanio has done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes on all the gene keys, the programming partners, the lines, the pathways, the spheres. It's such a brilliant tool. I wish that I had found your podcast back in my early days of the gene keys, because I feel like I would be so much farther in my understanding now. So I'm curious to know, like, how you found your way to the keys, and what was that like one breakthrough where you were like, oh my God, I need to learn more? And then what inspired you sharing your contemplations through this podcast?
Well, that was 2013, 2014. I had a band. We were doing some sort of kind of jazz rock thing. And
what do you play in your band?
In that band, I was playing guitar.
Okay.
And it went downhill. And that was the last band that I had, because I hadn't had a band in a while. I've had several bands throughout my life. And I felt kind of depleted, because I love music. I love playing music, and specifically with people. I love playing with people. Is the best, And I also I love dance music. So it's interesting, because it's like there's really no people on dance music. It's just the DJ or whatever the beat. You can make it yourself, right? So at the tail end of that one, I started kind of going downhill, and that eventually, ended with a very kind of like the darkest part of my dark night, which it happened gradually, because he had been cooking for a while, and so, but what happened was that I started writing my book, because it's a novel. And it's it comes out from my love of sci-fi and my kind of dissatisfaction with the metallicness of it, like it's always very like constricted, and so I kind of started imagining what would it be if I were to take, for example, did you ever see this movie Howl's Moving Castle by it's an anime movie by made by Studio Ghibli. Oh my God, you gotta see that. It's like it's a fantasy. It has nothing, it's not sci-fi at all, but the lusciousness of the the openness of it, and the quirkiness of it's just Studio Ghibli is one of my favorite film companies, anime companies out there. Anyway, I had this idea that I wanted something to be sci-fi, definitely, founded in science, but at the same time that science morphed to such a degree that it was magic, but it is still science, and you could prove it, with, not necessarily with the science that we have now, because it's a lot of gibberish, but really when you start understanding spirit and realize that everything is ultimately science, And so I had this idea of making something that was big and happy, not necessarily happy, because just not that constrictive sci-fi that you're always on the ship and there's like closing core. I wanted plants and I wanted spaceships, but I wanted trees in space. I mean like a whole other thing, and that was a sort of escape of my, I wanted to just kind of like, my mind was, the personality was just really hitting, And so, but when I get creative, when I play music, when I make art, I can dive into spirit, right? And it totally writes, it helps me write. And so what happened was that I started thinking about the name for my book. And the first thing that came to my mind was the Manifestors. And that somehow, because I when I have ideas about names for like websites or something, I Google it, the website is available. And this time I somehow ran into human design, because that was the only place anywhere that had the word manifestor. Mm-hmm. And so I found human design, and I found my human design thing, and I realized, then I thought, oh, this is interesting. And I looked at, I was a manifestor generator and stuff like that, and that kind of stayed there. I wasn't really necessarily happy with the name. You know, it was just a thing that kind of led to another thing. And then next thing I am I don't know if a few months or a year or something happened. I found out that there was something related to human design on an interview with Regina Meredith on Gaia, but it was actually Richard Rudd talking about the Gene Keys. And so I saw the interview, and that's how I found about the Gene Keys. I saw it and I'm like, is this has to do with this human design thing? I didn't understand that there was a difference between human design and Gene Keys. And then I got the book, and that's when I had the idea that I was going to well, I got into the book. I didn't quite get it because it's a big fat book, and it's, you know, it's like kind of like became like the door, you know, like it's stuck for the door. It's like it just sits there on it's like as a weight, you know. And I got the hologenetic profile, but I didn't quite dive into it. I'm the kind of person that I start from the middle and then go to the beginning and then to the back and then come back. So I'm not, if you tell me start here, I start there, you know? So it's like, and I start making my own connections. So that sat there for about a year or so, and I got more and more depressed. And then I started painting, and that helped me a lot. And then I continued writing. And then at some point I realized that the main thing that I realized about the Gene Keys is that it's literally a list of attitudes. And so I had learned earlier in my life that everything is attitude. And so if you could really understand and change your attitudes, you would change everything. And so, but I never quite understood what attitude was, you know. Okay, change your attitude. What does that even mean, you know? And then now I have a cheat sheet, 64 attitudes with like the path, you know, go from here to here. And then there's this other one that it's like, you know, the gift of God. But that became so clear, you know, like, okay, you go from here to here. And so I got really into it, but I found it incredibly complex and long and vast. And I was like, when you're in front of a huge mountain and you go like, how the fuck am I gonna climb that thing? You know, it's like, it felt overwhelming. And then I had the idea, well, why don't I use the Gene Keys to make my characters of my book? And so that way I can start kind of playing with it and having fun and learning about it. And that's how I started diving into the Gene Keys, because I wanted to write my story. And then I found it incredibly profound how I could build very multi-layered characters that were not just one thing, but they had all this depth with them, you know. And but I had the idea, that was the original thought, right? But then I figured out that it's like, you know, just reading a page takes me half an hour, you know. And so it's like,
hey, superstars, thank you so much for sharing your sacred attention with me. If you are receiving any value whatsoever from my videos, I am encouraging you to give back, to pay it forward by supporting me on my Patreon community, on my locals community, on both. Your support allows me to keep on keeping on and to keep making content like this. It used to be much easier back in the days of a free press, but now, given all of the censorship and the shadow banning, it really is challenging for content creators to continue to put out so much work. I'll just speak for myself. I'm excited for it to be easier for me to continue to put out more content. And the primary way that it can be easier is by you supporting me financially by way of my Patreon and or my locals, where for as little as $5 a month, you get to be my hero and receive oodles of bonus content, and we both get to win. Okay, thank you so much for your support, for your attention, and for being omniscopic amazingness.